Hey guys, Lord Exas here, just bringing you an update. So earlier I did a video on some brief notes and stuff I noticed on when, version 3.2 came out. So now I'm going to be going a little more in-depth with some of the patch notes and everything, just kind of by going down a list. Not doing anything special, just going down a list. So first of all, I'm going to go over some changes that were made to combat. Now, they do go over this in-game, but considering how many people are probably still going to miss it, I figure I'll go over it anyway. And that is that the biggest thing is your parry can now be used in your OSS or sword skill chain, which opens up a wide variety of options. While it doesn't count as a chain in itself, it doesn't cut off your chain, and it doesn't have any flashes like, say, dodging does either, so keep that in mind. As well as a few visual quirks to other sword skills have been added. One in particular I noticed was in the rapier. I believe the skill is Star Splash. It has a couple slashes in between the thrusts, so that's interesting. And the last point I was going to go over in terms of the combat is when out in the field, you have two options with your party. You have the all-out option and the allied skill. The all-out option has been changed to now only have 2-second cooldown, meaning you have significantly more chances to activate the holo synchronizer and just making things easier overall, especially when using a two-man party, which is what I personally prefer. Next up is the map. Now, this is nothing special. It's something they do every update, is they kind of improve visuals on the game itself. One in particular is a lot of armors that have drapes and fabric that hang off. It will now, you can see your character kick them around a lot more, which I believe they did this time simply because they were adding capes to several of the armor sets, and why they did have that before with the way Tia's cutscenes, you could kind of tell looking back that they weren't really optimized. But it's more so on any armors that have it around the legs that this will be noticeable. However, some of the ones that have patterns, their animation will sadly still stretch, so that's a bit of a bummer. And while it's nothing big, if you go to your map and go to different world locations, you will notice that, keep in mind though as well, I am on a PlayStation 4 Pro. This might not be the case for a regular PS4. The teleport crystals on map now have a little bit more of a glow to them that was not there before. So there's that. And likely areas, I haven't gone through the entire map again, but I have noticed from what I have that they may have added grass or trees in certain areas and just made the world look a little bit more alive once again, like they tend to do. So next is, sadly, we got to talk about the modding community. So personally, I am just very against the modding community, but now they actually have a system in place that will read if you were modding. Your character's marker and name will go red and kind of puffy. So if I were to go like this real quick, I believe it should come up even in single player. It does not. Either way, my name is not red and puffy. I do not mod this game. I never have any desire, and I never will. However, it also brings some attention that's a little annoying, because a buddy of mine was simply in a room with a modder, and now he has that red name even though he himself doesn't mod, which is kind of frustrating for both of us that he has to deal with that. However, there is a way to remove the red name. I'm not aware if it is on this version of the game that you can do it yet, but it's as simple as getting rid of all your modded equipment. You simply just sell it or trash it and then restart the game. Not from square one, just reboot your save, and after you've saved, after you've ditched those, and that should go away. However, keep in mind, if you mod this game, you will get that red cursor, and a lot of people probably will just not let you into an online room, so keep that in mind. Next is the level dungeon. Not the level dungeon, the infinite dungeon. So this is something a lot of people have been talking about, even before this came out. It is a dungeon that has 1,000 floors, and it can be accessed once you beat the main story campaign. I'm not sure if it has to be the entirety of all 3 DLCs or just the most recent, but that once you're in it, it drops armor in there like there's no tomorrow. You level up like crazy, and it is how you control your new level caps. So if you installed version 3.20, your level cap will now be 150. However, once you beat story mode, that level cap will jump to 300. And here's where things start to get crazy, because when you're inside of this dungeon, it's pretty tough. Like, you can't use any of your healing skills, and you have to completely rely on regular potions. Crystals are inactive, and several other things. However, by getting to floor 100 of this dungeon, not only does it give you a system that allows you to revive any NPCs that might have died along your journey, it also jumps your level cap to 999. Now, this sounds like a bit of a doozy, but I myself am only on floor 41, I believe, and I already jumped up 20 levels significantly quickly, and that was without using any external experience potions and such. Literally just using my XP gain skill, and that's all I did. And you jump up levels really quick, especially with the system they implemented on the Warriors of the Sky update that allows you to continuously multiply your experience by chaining enemies to death really quickly. So keep that in mind. Next is visualization. So they have added several things to visualization. As you can see, I have, personally, really dope armor set. But basically, it's the same as before. Pseudo-tailor, come to her, and you can do things. Change the way you look. But what's interesting is now you can visualize your partner. So you just hit your partner, same as always, coordinate. I'd recommend, make sure you get the face out of the way. But what's interesting here is they have added more costumes. You have all the ones you had before that you can use, but they have added stinking, you can have Kismel's now, you can have Rains, you can have Sevens, you can have Tia's, Alice's, Irigo, I believe it's pronounced, I'm not sure, and even the officer's outfit for those Tomo fans out there. But yeah, that's just really neat, and however, keep in mind, in order to unlock Alice's and Irigo, however it's pronounced, you have to beat their story campaigns. So those aren't available to you right at the start. Next up is fusion. So, as you know, you have the attacker, tank, healer, and whatnot fusions. I went over this briefly earlier, and I'm not going to go too much more in depth in here because I haven't done it much more myself either. However, they did add on your friends list. Now you can see who has what unlocked. So keep that in mind, but these things are incredibly broken. Like, again, I haven't delved in too much yet outside of attacker, but if you're doing one you particularly like, I'm sure you'll figure it out. The things they add, it's just ridiculous. I basically have the max sword skills you can do simply by being an attacker fusion level 5, and they just add so much. My attack speed is through the roof, and yours can be too. And each one has about those same things for their respective one. The healer will give you crazy healing abilities and whatnot, which will be borderline useless to you in that dungeon, but that's beside the point. Now, sadly, we have to talk about one of the parts of the game that I rarely touch. I think most people rarely touch because you kind of forget it exists. The dating sim part. So, they have, like they do every time, added more conversations, just more trigger events, and more scenes that you can trigger. However, on the combat side of the things that the dating sim would provide, they have added another level of the date buff, which is still something I cannot say with a straight face. This one in particular is called Rising Passions, and you cannot activate it normally. Before, to get the buffs, you would just activate a private chat with your partner before going out into the field. Now, in particular, there are certain events that can trigger around town, and each character I've noticed does have one particular area, if you take them, it's more likely to trigger. With my partner here, it's the stupid fruit, one of the fruit stands in the Lakeside Park. However, these conversations are more in-depth, you have to pay a lot more attention, and I believe they can only be triggered when you have your character at the highest affinity rank. But basically, what Rising Passions does is it will trigger a new level to the Holo Synchronizer called Linked, I believe it's Linked Hearts, yeah. And factoring that in with the shorter cooldown of All Out, you can rack up your damage really quick. It makes it super easy to get your damage multiplier on the monster up to a natural 4 outside of your regular chaining, and just something to keep in mind because you can do quite a lot with it. Next is Enigma orders. So a lot of people have had trouble getting paragons, and that's mainly because they had it so for Ethereal Heart, for example, you had to beat whatever the name of that dragon is. They wanted you to do it 50 times. And then for a second one, you'd had to do it an additional 10. And that was ridiculous. It was nothing but a grind. It wasn't very fun. Then they bumped it down to 30. And now for most of them, they have bumped it down to 5. So definitely a lot easier to get. And for a player like me who plays this game consistently, that's both a good and a bad thing, because now more people can get a Paragon, but now more people can get a Paragon. So, yeah. And the other thing is they upped how many Enigma orders you can have on you at once, as well as when you do go to the Goddess statue, you can view every single Enigma order. They're not randomized anymore. They'll all be on the list, and they will have a mark by them if you have completed them before. Other thing with that is the Goddess statue now allows you to pay 10 skill points to completely change what elements are on the map. And this isn't limited to the ones that aren't eaten by monsters. If a monster has devoured one, it will change what monster has eaten what. And as somebody who prefers to target the monsters, that is a godsend. Alright, next, Shady Merchants. So, the Shady Merchants, thanks to another YouTuber that I'm sure you're all aware of, Koyoki, I believe, uploaded a video that shows something that you can get with a Shady Merchant, because I have nowhere near that many Ultona gold pieces. But basically, by forking over hundreds of these Ultona gold pieces, the Shady Merchant can give you armors that are ridiculously good. Like, I think one of them had a base defense of like 400. It was absurd. But what's interesting about these armors is without visualization, they look like the NPC gear that you might just see around town. So that is really nifty. But the better ones are 700 plus Ultona gold pieces. So quite a lot. And the other thing with the Shady Merchant is the second one did a thing where basically you could talk to her and she would enhance your weapon beyond its limit. So if you brought her like a level 9 legendary Tai Fang, you could bump its stats up even further. But you were told you could only do this once. You can now do it as many times as you want, assuming you have 300 Ultona gold pieces to fork over. So not cheap, but definitely worth it. And next point to cover is back to the 1000 floor dungeon. Is whatever weapon you have equipped in your right hand will get it will gain more and more power simply by having it equipped, and it will keep this outside of the dungeon. If you look at my Paragon Ethereal Heart right here, it has an Oracle plus 40. That is what I get from the dungeon. So a plus 5 regularly on this weapon would probably be no more than 380 as its base attack. And that's without using special blacksmithing crystals. But this Oracle just keeps going higher and higher and giving the weapon more and more power, which is amazingly ridiculous, especially because you keep it outside of battle. Now, what's interesting about this is you could potentially take an earlier blade, like a Neil blade, and this is the sword Kirito has in Sword Art Online Progressive that you get for having data of the Vita version of Hollow Fragment. This sword was good for early game. I used it up till I think the start of the desert. But from that point on, it's completely pointless, even though it's a really cool looking sword. But now I could take it into this dungeon and keep it equipped and give it power, making a pretty useless weapon now that looks cool actually worth something. Same with, say, the Emperor's Sword that you get from a quest with Philia. Just something really nice they allowed you to do. Speaking of the Infinite Dungeon, our next point is NPC revival. So one of the biggest points of this game was that NPCs die and don't come back because NPCs have their own personality, yada yada yada, plot stuff. But you couldn't bring them back. However, once you get to floor 100 of the 1,000 floor dungeon, another thing that will be available to you is NPC revival. Now, I haven't gotten there myself, so I'm not 100% certain how it works. I just know it's there. So I'll probably give you more details on that when I get to that point. I've got 60 more floors to go till I get there. So that will be something to look forward to. And last but certainly not least is the Master's Stroke in Blacksmithing. So what this is something that I really appreciate. Basically what it is if you have your blacksmith's level up really high, I think I have Lizbeth's smithing skill currently at almost 100, 120 almost. I'm not entirely sure. But basically, 118. What it does, so if I go to Ethereal Heart, if you notice, chance of Master Stroke and chance of success. So the Master Stroke will increase the stats and just everything on the weapon higher than normal. So it will take a larger jump than it normally would. And that's great news for people who spend all their coal constantly upgrading weapons like I do. See, now what's interesting about this is this also works in tangent with the crystal catalyst orders. So if you were to take this guy here, which has a 90% chance of increasing your blacksmithing success, as well as upping the stats, using those in tangent will basically, you can quadruple the stat gain, which is a scary thought. That on top of the Oracle Plus thing we already talked about, makes it so you can have weapons of ridiculous strength. Complete ridiculous strength. But yeah, that is pretty ridiculous. Now it comes to my attention, one last thing that I forgot to mention with the visualization on your partners is you can turn that off simply by talking to them and, where is it? Remove visualize, and they will go back to their regular armor. And one more thing to note is change of heart. So for those of you who do AI training, this is your best friend. So anyone who trains an AI knows that it all boils down to your emotion traits that you have on here. This controls their behavior, what they do, how much they attack, how they buff, and all of that. Before, how you would get rid of this is you would unthumbs up it, take the NPC character to the inn, and rest through a full day-night cycle. So if it's day, you had to turn it night, and then turn it day, and then it would get smaller, but not get rid of it entirely. So basically what change of heart does is you can just completely erase one of these instantaneously, which makes AI training so much easier, and I'll get to that probably as well on a later date. So they still don't let you look at your partner's SP and stuff, but yeah. And on the visual side of things, your skill list has also been overhauled. Any of the attacker fusion special skills you can now view on your list. They will appear everywhere. You've got limit elimination, vigilant forces are all here, eternal life, as well as your weapon. If you look at the scimitar, it has been changed slightly with how they look. So nothing big, but it's there. But yeah, that's about all I'm going to cover for now. There's just so many little things that if I went through everything, it would take way too long. But as always, keep it real and keep it weird. Exas out, guys.